Beginning exercises for the shoulder. One of the first things we always talk about in the office is start simple, work your way up. We have to start with pain-free range of motion and just improve from there. That old adage of no pain, no gain, it doesn't apply in this scenario at all. This is about pain-free range of motion, slowly increasing some flexibility, strength to get to the endurance and finally that joint stability. And many times what we're dealing with here is a little bit of upper cross syndrome, where we're up and dominant with those upper traps. We're rounding forward, the head's coming forward. So we overuse the upper traps and levator scapula, and we're not activating not just the deep cervical flexors, but the lower trap and serratus, which are big scapula stabilizers. And we need the scapula stabilized to do about anything with the shoulder. So this is usually our weakest point, is so we re-engage these lower scapula stabilizers, starting that process again. They're just not working like they used to. All the exercises are trying to get you to do what you're not very good at. And with the shoulder, it's that trap stabilizing the scapula along with the serratus posterior, shutting off the upper trap, activating the lower scapula stabilizers. So there was an article in the American Journal of Sports Medicine of rehabilitation of scapular balance, which exercises to prescribe, and it went through a series of them, and it really showed that using exercises that use the lower scapula stabilizers and not the upper are the best way to go. And those are ones that we're going to utilize and do in the office from the very beginning on day one and continue all the way through. Because our goals are to increase range of motion, flexibility, strength, endurance, and joint stability. But we have to be aware of the weak link, because the weak link is always what gets hurt. It's always what causes problems. So if we overload that weakest group, we're going to get in trouble. And you can't get a shoulder better without getting all the mountain climbers to the top of that mountain. So we need the pain-free range of motion, flexibility, strength, endurance, and that joint stability all to get to the top. We just can't leave any behind. But when we start with the simplest, which is a pain-free range of motion. I really like using the stick. You get to use both arms. One is helping the other. We can add extension by raising it above our head, that lateral flexion going to the side. We definitely want to work on rotation. Thoracic rotation is one of the limitations of the shoulder. That's also one of the areas we need to re-engage and get back going. So taking that stick and pushing with, in this example, the right arm towards the left to get further rotation into it. We can use that opposite arm once again to push the arm out and back and all the planes in both extension and at an arc angle. I really like the door frame stretch. We can change the position of our hand, and that's going to change which part of the chest and anterior shoulder is going to get stretched. So moving that arm around like a clock, going from that 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, then 10, 11, 12 position is a great way to get that chest stretched and loosened up. We do want to stretch the back of the shoulder, and we can pull that arm across with a thumb up versus thumb straight back, and thumb down is actually a different stretch. Try it out. In this example, you see Mike really getting a hold of the back of that shoulder muscle when he rotated that thumb down and found a kind of unpleasant surprise in his shoulder musculature. The sleeper stretch is a great way to get that back of the shoulder scapula, where we lay on the arm. We're using the opposite arm to pull on that wrist, push it, which will rotate the humerus, providing that shoulder stretch we're looking for, but be comfortable with this one. For the first exercise, it's the scapular squeeze, where we're trying to pull the shoulder blades together. But really the trick is to pull them down first and then pinch them together. We don't want to engage that upper trap. And most people, if I have them do this, they're going to accidentally pull the shoulders up and rotate them back. Well, we want to do the opposite. We want to teach you what you're not very good at, which is pulling them down and then pinching them back. That's going to engage that lower trap, not the upper. So quit using the upper, quit cheating. Use the lower, so pinch down first, then squeeze. Hold the position for 10 to 30 seconds and then relax and repeat. It's a great one to do during the day when you're bored at the computer. I like the YTWL exercise progression. We can do it without weights, so just pure range of motion. It's more of a stretch. We can start adding a light band, working through the band progression from red, yellow, green, and blue. We can use weights. We can do that standing. We can do it laying. We can do it single leg, or we can start adding an unstable surface. So it's the YTWL progression, but we start and work our way backwards at the easiest one first. So that's the L. When we're making an L with our arms, they're at a 90-degree angle. and they're just going to pivot and rotate. That elbow shouldn't swing. It should be pivoting on an axis. So usually the easiest thing to do is just use one arm at a time to pivot, where you can focus on keeping the elbow rotating and not leaving the side of your body you're swinging. So just pivoting slowly out and even slower back in is the key. So slow and steady out, even slower on the way back, keeping that elbow pulled down low and that 90-degree angle for the L. If that goes well, we can move to the W. The W, so if you look at Mike's arms, he's making a W where we're keeping the elbows down, shoulders down, and then we're pulling that wrist backwards. We're squeezing the back of the scapula together, but also squeezing the posterior shoulder muscles. If that goes well, we'll move to the next one, which is T. So here's what the L looks like with that 90-degree and the W form. Slow, steady, pain-free, slowly increasing strength and endurance. It starts to get us a little bit of trouble when we move towards that T position, where the arms are out like a T and pulling backwards, pulling that shoulder blade. Once again, we want to focus on keeping that scapula down as the first movement as we go to pull the shoulders back and slowly coming back from that position for that eccentric load in the shoulders. If we have pain as we have the arm up at this angle, slowly lower the angle of the wrist. So it's not a good T, it's kind of a sloppy T. That'll open up that shoulder, should reduce some of the pain. If we still have pain with that, don't go through the full range, just do a partial range that doesn't hurt. And finally, the good old-fashioned Y, as we're pulling the shoulders and scapula back in a pain-free zone once again. Once we've mastered those, we like adding into the wall glides. We're going to put our forearms against the wall and slide them up, both straight up and then also out at a Y angle. We can add a resistance band to make that exercise a little bit harder. The ball on the wall, I think, is one of the easiest exercises to start with and find a beginning point and working up from there. So if you're old enough, you remember the old-fashioned Karate Kid, the wax on, wax off, where you can do small circles in both directions. Well, we can do that. We can also do holds, which is just put the ball in a position and push into it for an isometric contraction. So with this example, what we want to do is get that shoulder and elbow a little bit awkwardly low, which will help us engage that lower scapula muscle group, and then push and just hold for 10-15 seconds and relax. We can do several sets of that to exhaustion. We can change the angle of the ball, reset up our hands, shoulders and elbow, do the same thing over and over, and then move towards that wax on, wax off. As people get tired or they start moving the ball up, that's when people want to start hiking that shoulder again out of habit. Really work against that. We're trying to build the coordination of a good shoulder movement with a good shoulder scapulization to resist that upper cross syndrome or sixth scapula. Eventually we can get that hand up above the head as we do the wax on, wax off, or the hold positions. So that's going into the forward. We can also do the opposite in reverse, where we turn around, put the back of a hand and wrist against the ball, push into the wall, holding that position. Once again, moving all the way around like a clock, we'll use different muscle groups. Now, we can also make this exercise a little bit more difficult by changing our base. Instead of having 2 feet nice and wide apart, we can move our feet closer together. We're moving into a tandem or even one-legged. Believe it or not, trying that YTWL in that tandem stance or a single leg makes it quite a bit more difficult, along with the ball on the wall. And when we're on one leg, we have our legs have to work with our pelvis, which has to work with our core, which has to help stabilize the scapula and stabilize the arm. So we're getting the system challenged to do a better job, and we're not putting increased weight in there that'll get us hurt. So once again, we go back to that principle of all the mountain climbers have to get to the top of the mountain. You can't get one climber above the other or the rope gets tangled up. We need the whole group to move up. So working on that pain-free range of motion and flexibility first, adding some slow strength and endurance with that stabilization of the unsteady surface, that ball on the wall, and then also changing our foot stance to make it an unsteady single leg stance to make us work a lot harder without a heavy weight against our injured shoulder. So we have plenty of information online on our website, robertsonfamilychiro.com, or in the shoulder book that's available on Amazon or in the office. We hope this has been helpful information, and these exercises help get you started to working towards that pain-free shoulder to get you back to your daily activities. Have a great day.